Well, good evening and welcome everybody. It is Wednesday at 7 o'clock, and that means it is Workbench Wednesday time. Welcome to you all. This is a night we've been talking about on the show, promoting it for the last several sessions. It is the first night of our Build With Me program. So we're coming to you here live from the Workbench. I hope you've all got your kits ready to go so we can get started doing some building. If someone could please just give me a thumbs up, let me know that we've got good sound. That appreciate it as always. And we'll be ready to go. Hi, Dave. Good to have you on board. Hi, Garrett. Good to have you back again. And so let's just talk a little bit as we have some more people jump on board here and get started. Uh, Going to try and do my best tonight to keep up with questions and comments that you have about the kits, and we will do my best. As you know, as you start getting fixed on the model, sometimes it's hard to jump back and forth to your eyes to the screen. But as I get questions, I will do my best to answer them. If you're catching this, if you're watching it live, great. If you miss something as we build, you can always go back and watch it later on the YouTube or Facebook channels. We'll keep these things on there for a good long while. And feel free to ask questions tonight. If you don't get them tonight, maybe you'll catch it on the rewind, or I'll try and get to you in 2 weeks when we do our next broadcast in this series. The lighting's a little dim on me here tonight. I apologize for that. It's the way I have to have things set up here on my Workbench to try and balance everything out. We'll zoom in on the Workbench cam here in a little bit as we get started building, and I think that will be a little bit more clear. So hopefully that works for all of you. So please, if you're building along with us tonight, whatever the kit may be, chime in the comments. Let us know what you're building. Feel free to post photos and things like that on Facebook as well in the comment section as we build this. I want to remind everybody we'll be doing our kits for the next two sessions, so tonight and 2 weeks from tonight, and then following that wrap up, you'll have an opportunity. Please post some photos of your final results on our Facebook page, and you can then we'll be you'll be entered into a raffle to win a prize through LionelStore.com. So you can get the fun of building for a few weeks and then the chance to win a nice prize also. But whether you do that for the contest or just do it for the fun, I hope this is a good experience for everybody. If you've never built a kit before, we'll try and cover some of the basics. If you've built your first or second or 5,000th kit, you might still pick up a tip or two here tonight, or just at least sit back, relax, and enjoy building with us. And feel free to share your tips and comments as we go along. I'm going to try and answer comments and stay focused on the model building tonight. I'll go ahead and plug tomorrow right now. Tomorrow, about this same time, we will be on the Train World TV, YouTube, and Facebook channels as part of the virtual York show. So I'll be talking more about product and some other cool things there tomorrow night on that. Tonight, we're going to focus on the Workbench and having some fun with kits together. So there's my beautiful wife chiming in and saying hi as well. So now I know I have to behave. Well, that's going to be a trouble spot here for sure. Let's get started and talk a little bit about the kits and what I'm going to be doing. And again, if you're building along with us, please share what you're building and in the comments so we can do this together. This isn't just supposed to be you guys watching me build. I want it to be an interactive program where we get to share thoughts and experiences and have fun together. All right, so with that, I'll make you stop looking at my ugly mug on the big screen, and we'll switch over to the messy Workbench cam here and talk a little bit about the kits. So what I'm going to be building tonight is what we call a kit bash, and that is where you take parts from multiple kits and mix them together and make something uniquely different. And I'm going to be using some of our Lionel kits for this to build exactly what I am building over the next two sessions. You're going to need actually 3 kits in total to get all the parts. The first, I'm trying to get this centered under the light here, is the Phillips House kit. This is one of our HO kits. We have a nearly identical kit in O scale as well. And you're going to need 2 of these, really just for this one little dormer part right here. because the building I'm going to do is going to use 2 of those. And then I'm also going to be adding on a garage to the side of the house. And so for that, you could use the detached garage kit, which comes with 2 of those. There are other kits in these series of kits that have this roof section, that have different porches, that have garages attached. So you can mix and match the kits to get the parts you want. I've built several models out of these kits already, and the only consistent theme is that I never really follow the directions. So I've got already on hand a lot of extra parts to play around with, which makes it nice to do things like this. If you're building your first kit, maybe you don't want to think so far outside the box. Just build what you see on the box itself and go from there. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I still, after building many kits, oftentimes I see a kit I like just for the way it looks on the box, and that's the way I try and build it. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Other times, as you get more comfortable building your kits, you see something in a kit that you really like and want to incorporate in something else. You might buy a kit just to get a certain entryway or type something like that. Or you just buy it because you like the general look of things and go wild and make something up and have some fun with it. So you don't have to build exactly what I'm building. In fact, you probably don't want to build exactly what I'm building. That's sort of the whole point of kits and doing it your own way. But if you did 2 times this and then an add-on garage kit would get you all the parts that you need to do what we're going to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 2-story house, this 2-story sort of colonial revival house, and we're going to turn it into a Cape Cod. And so to do that, I'm going to use this main section, the 2x3 main house section here, and we're going to lob the bottom floor off of that. So we're going to turn it into still a 2-story house because we're going to add some windows here to the attic area and make that a second floor. We're going to make it a 1-story Cape Cod with 2 of these dormers in the front and then a large dormer in the back that we'll actually cut another wall section out to do that with. So there's going to be a little bit cutting and splicing and fiddling around with this to make it something very different from what you see on the box. But that's part of the fun of it. So we're going to start there tonight with cutting up a wall section and adding a window to get our first main sections of this. And I've done a few of these already to work ahead a little bit, but I saved one here to do on the show tonight. As you can tell, I did primer this. One thing I like to do with anything that I build, no matter what the material of the kit is that I'm working with, is give it a coat of primer. It gives the paint that we'll be applying later on something to adhere to, and you can and also helps kill the plastic look and the shine look of things. So I always recommend a quick primer, and any primer will do. I usually use an inexpensive rattle can primer from the hardware store just to give it a quick shot and give the paint some tooth. We're going to cut this piece out of the sprue and then get started. We can toss that out of the way. All right. And before I forget, since we're covering some of the basics here again tonight, after you trim your parts off, just come back with a sharp knife and trim any little excess from the gate off of the part so you have a nice smooth edge. And if absolutely necessary, you can grab a little bit of sandpaper or a file and finish that off too. I'm not going to worry about the bottom because that's about to disappear. So the first thing I had to do when determining what we were going to do on this kit to make it a single story is figure out where to make the cut. We know we want to cut this in half somewhere, but where in between these windows does the cut end up having to fall? And to do that, I used one of the doors from the kit as a guide. We'll grab another one here real quickly so you can see how this works. This is the easy way to do this. And the nice thing about this kit is it's a scribed, simulated siding material, so you already have a nice set of horizontal guidelines to help you work. When I put this door in, the window opening, these are interchangeable, you'll see where it falls, and where it ends up falling is basically, I don't know why I feel the need to hold it up to that camera, it basically falls right in line with the top of the windows on the first floor. So that makes our cut pretty easy. Now, unfortunately, that means we're going to lose this section of the wall down here. I can't reuse the first floor, at least not on this model, but I still won't throw that material away. It'll still come in handy somewhere down the road, for sure. So with that figured out, I'm not even going to bother to mark it because I know it's this last horizontal. This last piece of clapboard siding right above the window is where I want to make my cut. I'm going to use a simple ruler to help guide my knife and make my cuts. And we're just going to drag right along the material. I'm also letting the siding underneath help be my guide on this. And I'm making a couple of passes, enough to score the material. I don't know if you can pick that up or not with the primer on there, but there's a small score on this. And now, instead of continuing to cut all the way through, I'm going to bend it, snap it, and break it off. And the nice thing about working with ABS and styrene is it cuts and breaks like that very easily. It's almost like working with drywall. And now I've got a piece of sandpaper here. I can take off that bottom edge, even everything up. And I'm good to go. And we'll judge this now. Now that I've already cut it, we'll test against our previous piece for a measurement check. And it looks like that's going to be pretty good. Spot on right there on the edge. So this gives us the new height of our house. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to add an attic window into this. Here's a piece, the other opposite wall of this that I did earlier. We're going to add another window upstairs to put a smaller second floor on this building. So the first thing I want to do, obviously, we're going to find the center point. And in this case, we're 2.5 inches across the wall. So 1 1/4, make a little mark. And just going to lightly pencil in my center line here from the peak of the roof down. Okay, that gives me a reference point for the window to come. Now, in determining the height, you have a little bit more flexibility. This window can fall almost anywhere here along this plane that we want. Since I've already done one window, I want to keep the height the same. So what I'm going to do is flip this wall over and use this as my template to mark my new window opening. Okay. Didn't quite get that top mark there with that pencil. Now I have enough there that I can cut with. You can see how quickly this is going without having to do a lot of measuring and complicated design work. Once you get used to working with the materials and building models, it's very easy to start with raw materials or even scraps of other materials and build your own designs from scratch. People get very intimidated by the thought of scratch building and not having anything to start with. It's not as impossible as you think. Once you get used to it, you can build almost anything you can imagine. One of the things that I do like about these Lionel kits is that they're designed to be modular. So they were designed to use the same parts, in other words, in manufacturing, from one kit to the next over and over again. So this interchangeability of parts, the ability to mix and match parts from different kits in these series is already inherently part of the models, which makes them very, very nice when you're starting to learn how to do this sort of thing. You've got a model that's already really designed for that. So now I'm going around the edges of the window and making a number of cuts here to try and score things. Now I can't just pop this out as easily as I could snap off the lower part of the wall. So you've got two options here. You can continue to score through this until you get all the way through, or we can go a slightly faster route. And anybody who knows me and my patience level knows exactly where I'm going to go with this. I haven't really started to come through the back of this yet, but I think we're in good shape for me to go ahead and start the next cheating step on things here. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut diagonally, corner to corner in the model. To give myself some breaking points. When you're working with plastic, the trick is to not try and cut through this in one shot. You want to take your time and take a little bit, work your way through it little bit by little bit. You also want to think about where you want your nice finished edges to be. So clearly, I care that the edges around my window are relatively straight and clean looking and not a lot of rough edges. So by scoring around these and doing a nice job here, I'm guaranteeing that I'm going to have a nice crisp line on the outside of this. I really don't care about anything else. If it's a little rough in the back, I'm not going to worry about it. If the middle of this gets torn all to pieces trying to get this out, I'm not going to worry about it. It'll be gone. You'll never see it. Even the edges on this, because the window will have other casings around it, you won't even see the whole edge of the window opening. So if you make a little bit of a mix up here or there, don't fret. Now, obviously, what I'm doing is I'm just using the tip of my knife, starting in the point I created in the center, to gouge out a little bit of a hole. If you have a drill handy, you can drill this out as well, just to get things going a little bit faster, however you wish to do it. I'm trying not to bring in too many power tools or crazy extra things here. A, to show you that you can do this with some pretty basic amount of tools, and B, so that I don't drown out the mic with a large motor tool. Now I'm using my small nippers again to come in here, take a smaller pair that will work better, and work out those diagonals. This is not going to be a pretty cut, but I don't care. At this point, I'm just trying to get myself enough room to start breaking off these middle pieces. And by breaking out the diagonals, you can already see how this is starting to tear itself out. And there goes our bottom chunk of the window. I'm sure there are some professional model builders out there cringing at the thought of the way I do this and how rough it looks. This is relatively thick plastic, and yes, you can continue to work with your knife and carve it all out very neatly, but it's hard on my fingers, and this will work just as well, and not a bad way to get some frustration out at the end of the day too, if all else fails. So doing here, take a look at some, see if we have any comments. All right, looking some things over. Yes, Thomas, I'm going to agree with you on that. And Garrett, just for the sake of tonight's program, let's keep the topics on model trains and not politics. This is a great hobby to help escape from some of that. I certainly respect anyone's political views. I'm glad to see that there are people interested in those things. But tonight, we're going to relax and build some models. Okay. Once you've got the bulk of the material out, come back through and trim out any of the rough stuff. I can already tell that mark is going to be a little bit small for the window. We'll test that in just a second and see how much more material we have to whittle away. All right. Take our casting, double check. It's a little narrow, a little short. I think it's narrow enough that I can come through and still work with my knife a little bit on this and take off some bigger pieces. But then I'm going to switch over and use a file or sandpaper to finish this off so that I don't take off more than I want to. Now's where it pays to have a little more patience and take your time and get it the way you want it. But again, our window frame is going to cover all of this. So if the opening is not picture perfect, it's going to be perfectly fine. We are getting close, getting close. So now I have just a small file, and I'm going to work back and forth here to get everything opened up just a little bit more until this piece drops right in. Yes, a quarter inch chisel would work real well on this, Chuck. Good call on that. This material is surprisingly easy to cut and work with. I've been spoiled. The last couple of kits I've been building have been wood kits, and that's really easy to cut and work with over the plastic. But whatever works for you to get the materials open, the end result will be the same. Okay, now let's check. So close. Oh, here we go. All right. I can almost force that in, but I can force that in now. That would stay in there pretty much without any glue on it. But just to be safe, I can see a little bit here in this top corner that's binding it. So I'm going to take that back a little bit. There's no reason to force it. And there we have it. So that's the easy way to add a window into your kit. No matter what kit you're building, now you have a quick idea of how easy that is to do. A nice thing about these kits that I'm working with here tonight is you get a lot more windows and doors than you need for most of the kits as they're designed. So don't throw those things away. Save them. You'll be surprised what you can build with them or when they're going to come in handy. All right. So that's the basic premise of how we're going to modify the walls. I've gone ahead, as I mentioned, and done the others ahead of time and started painting these a little bit tonight to test some colors on them. So those will be our two long walls. Here's our short wall upside down on the workbench. There's the other end of the wall. I've also gone ahead and painted the back side of these flat black. And the reason for doing that is this will, when we light up the building eventually, helps prevent the light from bleeding through the outside of the wall. Simple enough to do that. Don't have to, but if you know you're going to light the building, I highly recommend that. And it's a lot easier to do that now before you have anything else glued in and done. If you haven't already primed the model, you can prime the model before or after you do these cuts. That really doesn't make any difference. For the sake of tonight, because I knew I wanted to keep working and didn't want to be doing spray painting inside the house or on the camera, I did that outside about an hour or two ago, right after I got home from the office. So these would be ready to go for tonight. Okay. I feel a little bit of a rough burr right there. Just want to hit that real quick. So our roof is straight. Okay, so next we're going to get started with painting and adding some color. And this is an area that a lot of people get hung up on. I've shown this on a couple of different shows in the past, different ways to do this. Typically, a lot of times I like to use a sponge to sponge on the paint. And we're going to do a little bit of that with the windows and doors in a bit. But we're going to start off with a simple brush and brushing on our paint for the wall. I wanted to go with a red building with white trim. I decided was going to be the color palette for this. The red I'm using is an inexpensive craft paint. This is bright red. Nicole's, I don't know if this came from Walmart or Michael's or Target, one of the stores. You can find these things a lot of places. Some of the cheap paints work better than others, but all of them typically average between 75 cents and $1.50 a bottle. My first concern was this was going to be a little bit too bright, but with the gray primer acting as a base, it tones it down just enough to where I think it looks pretty good on the model, despite the fact that it looks almost pink when you see it straight out of the tube. Here, I'll show you real quickly. This will be one of the hidden walls of the kit. This will be the inside wall of the garage that will be against the house. So you'll never see this piece when we get the final kit done. But just to show how the primer helps improve things and also changes the base of the color a little bit. Here's that red paint if I went straight on the wall. And I'm not really much sold on that. Not horrible, but a little too bright, I think, for the look I was going for on this model. We're going to switch over and do it here on the primer surface, and it's a much darker hue already. No surprise, when you put a color over a darker base, you get a darker color. This will also dry a little bit darker and more even than it looks here going on wet. Typically, I like to do this with a brush, or a sponge, especially if I'm going for a more weathered look. I want this house to look like it has a little bit of age on it, but that it's still pretty well cared for. So I'm not taking a lot of time to distress the siding or do dramatic weathering effects on this. We're not going to do a whole lot of peeling paint. I sort of like the idea of maybe a little bit of a fade to the paint, maybe a few chips here and there. But a house that's lived in and relatively well cared for, and not a complete basket case. That being said, I'm also not worried about getting my paint 100% even across this either as I paint it. There are some darker spots and some thinner spots, and when it's all dry, that will actually work together very nicely. I may put a little bit more of a coat near the top because the paint near the top of the house would be more protected by the eaves and wouldn't have as much weathering on it. I got a little chunk of something there I'm not too happy with. I'll get that out of there. So just using this is a fairly thin paint, so it's going on and spreading easily. I haven't had to thin this down, but it's almost like painting with a heavy wash with this particular paint. So a fair amount of that gray primer is showing through and darkening the overall color, as well as providing a little bit of a gray wood undertone to this in places where the paint is just a little bit thinner. Now, if you want to add more weathering and more age to your house or your kit, whatever you're building, by all means, go for it. If you want it to look really bright and fresh and new, you can come back with this with a second coat or a third coat. Or for that matter, you could just do a coat from a spray can to get a good heavy and bright red on here, whatever color you would choose. There's no single right or wrong way to do this part of the hobby. This is where you start to make your model your own. This last wall. I'm trying as I paint this not to get the paint too far up in the bristles of the brush. That does tend to help lengthen the life of your brush considerably if you don't bring your paint all the way up into the neck of the brush there. So what's everybody building tonight? Let's see what you guys are all up to as you watch me paint the town red. Go ahead and put in some comments of kits you're working on, ideas you're having, questions you have, and let's see if we can answer some of those tonight. I'm actually in the middle myself of doing two of these group builds right now. Of course, there's this one, and then also doing a Craftsman kit build on Monday evenings with another Facebook group that's been a lot of fun. And there's probably about 24 or so of us building the same kit, each one doing it a little bit differently and getting different results. But a lot of fun to just get around the workbench together and share thoughts and ideas. And I find it a little bit motivational as well, because you know you've got a dedicated time that other people are going to be there, and you want to make sure you participate and do things. Question coming in: are these same inexpensive paints okay to use on foam core? Typically, yes, they are. These are an acrylic paint, so you shouldn't have any issues on foam core with this material. Where you want to be a little more cautious would be with your oil-based paints and stains on that, but these will work just fine on foam core. Not a problem. All right, so there's our main walls of the house. I've also got the garage walls pre-cut and pre-stained. Here I did lift a couple of boards on the side of the garage. Zoom in on that a little bit if I can for you. And that's easy enough to do. You can see one right here, a board that's been lifted. That'll stand out a little bit better once it's been painted to look like the siding has peeled up a little bit. And to do that, you simply take your knife. A chisel blade works really well for this, and work it underneath the lip of the siding and then peel up, and you'll get that little bit of a peel. Very easy technique to do to add some age to your wood clapboard walls. So add a few of those here to the side of the garage, but didn't go too crazy on this house. I want to keep it looking pretty decent. Also cut another window into this side wall to open up the garage door. And then, as we did before when we built one of these little garage kits on one of the first Workbench Wednesdays, I cut the garage door out of the door frame, and we'll probably do a neat little interior in the garage one here as well. I've got something in mind for my buddy Dave on that one. A fun little thing I think he'll enjoy down the road. Hint, hint. Okay. That's way too much paint on there. The paint goes on a little bit bright and does tend to darken a little bit as it dries. That's common with most of these acrylic paints. So something to think about as you choose your paint colors on your buildings. And while I'm building a structure here tonight, all these same techniques work on other models as well. So your rolling stock, your locomotives, anything that you want to detail, paint, weather, these same techniques will work on all of that. Go out and look at the world around you, see how things fade and age, and then look for ways to copy it. Again, trying not to be too even and perfect with the paint. I want a little bit of variety in here. That'll be probably the biggest extent of the weathering that goes on this model. We'll add a few little stains here and there later on, but for the most part, I'm just going to show a little bit of age on this and do it by having some thinner paint in areas on the walls. Again, not required to do it perfect all over everywhere. It looks a little odd as you're doing it, but as you get more into it, that starts to look right to you. And this will be our last wall. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with the dormers on the second floor yet, if they're going to be red, like the rest of the house or if they're going to be white. I figure once I get the first floor and the roof built, that's when we'll make that determination. Okay. But with this wall here, the garage, this will finish up our basic wall color paints, and we'll move on to painting windows and trim. And I'll do a little bit of a different method with that just so you can see some different techniques. All right. Now I'm going to clean out the brush. I always keep a jar of dirty water here on the workbench so that that's quick and easy to do. And also a paper towel handy. Keeping your brush clean will help keep it holding its shape and painting well for you for a long time to come. Whether it's an inexpensive brush or an expensive brush, try and take care of them. And then remember to put the cap back on your paint before you knock it all over the workbench and look like you had a massacre here. Okay, let's move on to some windows. I'm going to grab the little palette. Here's my door frame for the garage. Move some of these things out of the way. As this is drying, I'll hold this up again so you can see here. The paint's probably about half dry on here. And you can see where the areas where it was a little heavier applied, still a little bit more wet. And you have a much brighter red still. But as it's drying, it does turn into a darker, more barn red or cherry red. And then where you can also see that gray primer starting to sneak through because it's such a thin coat. You're getting that little bit of looks like the paint has worn off. And you've got sort of a chipped paint or peeling paint effect there on the wall with the gray wood showing through underneath. Okay, for our windows, what I'm going to do is paint these with white. And the trick with painting things white is never to use white, or at least not a pure white. It comes across very stark, very bright, and very unnatural. White weathers very quickly in the real world. What I like to use for a good clean white, this is called almost white. You'll also find things in various shades like this. Sometimes even a really light gray works very well. And it's just light enough that it's not a pure white. It doesn't look like a sheet of paper. And that's important as you put things on your models, because pure white usually does not look very good. The other nice thing about these acrylics is if you can't find the color that you want, you can usually mix it pretty easily. These mix very well, so you can add a drop to a gray or anything else that you want to add in there to tint this and make it the color of your choice. So now to paint these, I'm going to use a little chunk of this grout sponge. You'll find these in your home supply centers in the tile section. They're inexpensive. And they work quite well as cheap foam paintbrushes. We'll just tear off a little chunk. That's even more than I need. And I usually roll it so that I've got a little bit of a round edge on there. Hopefully I'm getting that in camera. And we're going to use this almost like a stamp to put the paint on. I'm going to dab a little bit on there. And now the trick here is I'm going to dab a lot of that off. I want this to almost go on almost like a dry brushing technique. We'll start here on this frame since it's loose and bouncing around. And now I'm just dabbing on the paint. Am I still in camera here? I'm not sure that I am. I'm going to dab that on. And we're using a stippling motion as we do this. It may take multiple coats. That's fine. But it's going to apply just a little bit of paint, and it gives you a little bit of texture as well, which is really nice when you're working on a plastic model, because we're trying to simulate something that's not plastic in real life. So by stippling, you can, and varying your stroke, you can create a variety of different looks. Probably still more paint than I want on there. It's a little thin. As you can see, I don't have any brush marks as I'm doing this. I will get sort of a spotted effect. This paint's a little runny. That's okay. I would rather work with less paint on the sponge than more, especially as you get into finer details and areas. For really small jobs, you can tear off a small piece of this and use tweezers to hold the sponge and work it into your tight corners and so forth. You can get the sponges in a variety of different sizes too. The holes on this are rather large, but you can find a much finer grain of sponge, if that's the right word for it. Makeup sponges work very well for this. I'm constantly raiding my daughter's supply cabinet for those. And if, as we do this, if it looks like it's going on in a way we don't like, it's not a big deal. We can come back and give it another coat later on and brighten that up a little bit. It doesn't take long for these acrylics to dry, which is another advantage of them. One more thing we can do, I haven't done it yet here on these. I've done it on some windows in the past. Quick modification. Some of the windows in later years, these 4-pane windows fell a little bit out of style. And I remember growing up our neighborhood, a lot of the houses were 2/1 or 1/1 windows. So we're going to go ahead and just quickly nip out some of these mullions. And although this is simple and subtle, it definitely changes the look of your model when you put these windows in. It makes it, again, just a little bit more different than the way it looked on the box, and that's okay. It's obviously a lot easier to take these out than it is to try and add them back in, though you could, I'm sure, do that as well. Also possible to simply replace these with a different kit window altogether if you have windows from another supplier that you want to use and interchange. I often find myself doing that on a kit. Sometimes I've even had kits that ship with a window short or a door short, and I go to the spare parts box and find something that looks close, or at least that will fit in the opening. And if I have to change a few other windows to get it to match, I do that. But it's not too, you don't have to wander too far in the world to find a house that has a replacement window that doesn't look like the rest of them. So it's a very easy thing to do, and a prototype for everything. And again, after you've built a few kits, you start to get a good spare parts box build up with lots of options for your next project. Right now, I'm just trimming off the little extra nubs here so that I have a good looking finish. I really need to. I'll just come in and file a little bit. Do we have any notes here? Chuck asks, when you cut the windows off the sprue, do you worry about touching up the unpainted spots? Yes and no. It depends where the mark is going to be and what I'm doing with it. You can cut these off before you paint. It's just as easy to do that. Typically, if I cut pieces off of the sprue before I paint, I'll get some painter's tape and roll it up on the palette so that it holds them in place. And then you don't have to worry about missing spots as you cut them off later. So that's one way around that. If I'm mixing a custom color for the windows or the doors or whatever the part may be, then I'm much more likely to do that. When I'm using a color like this straight out of the jar, it's not as big of a deal because I can go back and touch up later without having to try and match that original color. But to that point, we'll cut one out here and show you that we've got a little bit of tape left on here from the last project. our second coat here like this. And now I know I won't have any bare marks where this was cut off. Another question comes in: what type of plastic are these kits made of? ABS or styrene? These are ABS plastic kits. That's important when you go to do the gluing. There are a variety of plastic cements out there. Some of them will work on multiple types of plastic. Some of them are more specific. So you either want a general purpose or an ABS plastic cement for gluing these kits together. Or of course you can also use your CAs, your super glue type of glues as well. They will work on these kits also very nicely. Bob mentioned building models for eons and never thought of using a sponge. I hadn't thought of this one much either until about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now, when watching some other modelers online, and they started using this, and I said, hey, that looks easy enough to do. And once I tried it the first time, I was hooked. It's one of my favorite and most common painting methods. There's no single right or wrong way to build a model. And as you learn these new tricks and techniques, it's sort of like adding another arrow in your quiver. You've got different techniques that will work in different situations, and you start fine-tuning your building and your craft to where you know how you want to paint things, what techniques you want to use, not just the materials, but the methods. It doesn't mean that the methods you were using before aren't still good methods, that can't still give you good results. It just gives you another way to come about these techniques. Sometimes I use these cheap craft paints. Sometimes I use oil-based paints, craft oils, for painting. Other times I'll use hobby paints. Sometimes I'll airbrush. Sometimes I'll just get out the rattle can and hit with a coat of spray paint real quick. It all depends on what the goal is of that particular application. For some reason, actually, with this paint, I'm not super happy with the way the sponge is looking. I think it's just because the paint's so thin, or perhaps because, I think it's the thinness of the paint or the thickness of the sponge. The second coat, I'm sure, will hide all of this. But just for the sake of discussion, I'll grab a small paintbrush here and do a little bit with that. And you'll see a little bit of a difference in how the two windows look side by side when they're done. We'll hold them up here. So here we're using just a fine brush to paint the same window with a single coat. Questions here? Okay, so if we look, find the right window here. This is harder working upside down and backwards than you think on the phone. Here's the one I just painted with the brush, and here's one that was painted with the sponge. And then looking up here, this one has two coats with the sponge. So you can see a little bit of a difference in all three of those, and the results you're going to get. A second coat definitely hides a lot of the problems from the first coat. Again, I think it's because of the thinness of this particular paint. And with the cheaper acrylics, the craft paints, inconsistency is the only consistency. But you learn to work with it. And typically a thinner paint in most modeling applications is better for you than a thick paint, because you want to build up in layers. It's easier to add paint than to take it off. So being able to add paint in multiple layers works really well for you. These windows with just a single coat on them do have a much more worn look, but they don't look like they've been hit with a paintbrush either. So for an older building, or one that I wanted a lot of wear and tear on, this technique works very well. Let me grab one here. I think I have one close by as a demonstration piece. Here's the same kit that we're starting off with, just built a little bit differently. And this side has a little bit more of a green hue too. This was going to be the north side of the house. Here we'll go to the south side. That's just more sponge painted. And you can see here with the sponge, in this case, I was going for a much more worn look on the house, and a lot of paint chipping and showing through. So the sponge gives you that very good mottled effect here like that very easily. I want something a little less weathered for this particular model. I like them to each have their own story and each be their own unique bit of modeling. So each kit can be its own piece, and that's part of the fun of this. But that gives you some sense of the finish you'll get. Just doing very similar to what we've done here. This was painted with a gray primer, modeled with a sponge of off-white paint, and then this over top of that also I think got a wash or two of a light dark gray or black stain, a very light wash of that to tone it all back down and blend things together. In the next episode of our program, we'll be putting a roof on our house, and we'll do something very similar to what you see here as well. This was done with laser cut paper shingles over top of, you could do this over top of the plastic roof that comes with the house. In this case, I made a new roof because of the changes in positioning of the walls. I made a new roof simply out of some thin cardstock. So that's what we'll do next week, or 2 weeks from now. We'll put a roof on our new Cape Cod, and then add the dormers and so forth to it. And I'll show you how to work with these paper shingles. It's a really, really fun product, and really another easy thing to do that can take your models up to the next level with in overall appearance. I like to spend a lot of time. If I'm going to spend time on any part of my model, it's going to be the roof, whether it's a boxcar or a house or an industry or whatever it may be. That's the part that, as the giants we are in our model kingdoms, that's what we spend the most time seeing. So you want to spend some time on your roof, and a good roof makes a good model. Even if the walls and the details underneath are not quite what you'd like, you put a nice detailed roof on top of it, and you'll fool everybody every time, because that's where your eyes are immediately drawn to on things. All right, we've been going for about an hour. Obviously, the kit is nowhere near complete. But the next several stages are going to be very much the same as what I've been doing for the last 20 minutes. And so rather than have you all continue to nod off one by one as we do this, we'll wrap things up here for tonight. Please, if you've been working on things on your workbench, do take some time and share with us on Facebook and social media, and so that we can see what you've been up to. We want to enjoy your work along with this as much as you're enjoying learning from me. I really want to see what you all come up with, and the models that you're building, whether it's a Lionel kit, whether it's HO, O, S gauge, whatever you're working on. We want to see it and showcase it, and share that with everybody else, because we all have talents and skills, and we all get to see our kits and creations in a different way. So that's a lot of the fun of this is sharing with each other. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll continue to work on this as I have some time between other projects to try and get it a little bit further along. So the next time we get together, I'll probably have the basic walls together for the structure, maybe a foundation underneath it, and we'll start working on the roof and then some of the final details to really dress up and complete a model. So that you get to see some different techniques each time we do it. Hopefully you picked up a tip or two tonight, got maybe a little bit of inspiration to start working on a kit of your own. Hopefully some of you too have been building along with me, and we'll get to see some of your work here on Facebook over the next couple of days. Feel free to show in progress shots as well as completed works. And again, if you have questions, by all means on the modeling, tune in anytime, ask questions on Facebook. We're happy to follow up with you and answer things. Tomorrow night on the 7 o'clock, we'll start, I believe at 7 o'clock at Train World TV for Virtual York. We'll be talking more product and that type of thing tomorrow. There'll be a number of manufacturers on there with with me, not just Lionel. We'll have all the big O gauge guys in the house to talk about some new updates and things that are coming out. So definitely a program worth tuning into, and one that we'll have a lot of fun with. The guys there are always a blast to talk with, and have some fun. So highly recommend you tuning into that. And until next time, please everybody stay safe and stay well and stay on track. And we will see you in 2 weeks to finish up our models. Thank you all and good night.